Clarissa Johnson had spent her entire life carrying the weight of other people's needs. At 72, she had raised a son on her own, after her husband died young, worked 2 jobs until her knees gave out, and somehow still found the strength to make every Thanksgiving dinner a feast that left everyone clutching their stomachs in blissful pain. She was not a woman who complained. She had been born into hardship, grew up in the segregated South, and built a life out of scraps and grit. So when her only son Marcus, now a polished 45-year-old attorney with a promising future, announced his wedding, Clarissa felt the joy of a lifetime. She had dreamed of that day, not the grandeur, not the decorations, but the simple act of watching her boy, her pride, stand at the altar with a woman he loved. The new fiancée, Tiffany, was younger than Marcus by nearly 20 years. 26, slim and always immaculately dressed. Tiffany had the sharp cheekbones and quick smile of someone who knew how to impress in social circles. Clarissa had welcomed her warmly, hoping for the daughter she never had. She shared family recipes, invited Tiffany into her home, and even let the girl call her Mama C, which made Clarissa's heart swell with pride. But one Tuesday afternoon, just 5 days before the wedding, Clarissa's world shifted. She was in her kitchen, pencil tucked behind her ear, scribbling the final shopping list for the buffet she had promised to prepare. The plan was ambitious: roasted chicken with garlic butter, collard greens slow-simmered with smoked turkey legs, trays of cornbread, peach cobbler, potato salad, and enough sweet tea to float a boat. She wanted her food to be her gift, a love letter to her son on the most important day of his life. The patio door was cracked open. Outside, she heard voices drifting in with the breeze. At first, she ignored them, focused on calculating how many pounds of chicken she'd need to feed 150 guests. But then her ears caught her name. "Clarissa will handle it," Tiffany's voice chimed, light and dismissive. "Handle what?" another voice asked. Watching the kids, Tiffany replied with a little laugh. 15 of them, all night. It's like having a free nanny. And the best part? She's experienced. She raised Marcus alone. Remember, she won't even complain. She never does. Clarissa froze, pencil slipping from her fingers and rolling across the counter. Another voice, Tiffany's sister visiting from out of town, sounded hesitant. "Did you even ask her?" Marcus's baritone came next, tired but amused. "Nah, didn't need to. I mentioned kids would be there, and Mama C immediately offered to help if we needed. You know her always eager. She practically volunteered herself." "She's perfect for the job," Tiffany snickered. "Exactly. And since she'll be chasing kids all night, she won't be barging into our adult conversations or embarrassing us by fussing over the food. It's convenient, really, having a mother-in-law like her. A blessing." The sarcasm dripped like venom, and Marcus didn't even catch it. Clarissa pressed her palm against the counter to steady herself. Her heart pounded, not from age but from betrayal. She had opened her heart to that girl, shared traditions, treated her like blood, and here they were, scheming to use her as free-labor, no, worse, as someone to be quietly tucked away with the children so she wouldn't interfere. A rush of heat flushed her face. The voices outside kept chatting casually, unaware of the storm they had unleashed inside. Clarissa quietly walked away from the window, her breath shallow. Her knees trembled, not from arthritis but from a fury she hadn't felt in decades. She thought of all the nights she had stayed up late, testing recipes, planning decorations, ensuring this wedding would sparkle. She thought of Tiffany's soft Mama C and the fake warmth behind it. She thought of Marcus, her boy, her only boy, laughing along, blind to his fiancée's malice. By the time she sank into her armchair in the living room, she knew something inside her had shifted. They thought she was a servant. They thought she was too old, too desperate for love, too eager to please to ever say no. But they had forgotten she was Clarissa Johnson. This was the woman who, at 28, had buried a husband and still gone to work the next morning because bills didn't wait for grief. This was the woman who fought for her son's education when teachers underestimated him, who endured racism, sexism, poverty, and loss without breaking. She had dignity carved into her bones. And at 72, she would be damned if her only son and his fiancée stripped that dignity away. Clarissa spent the rest of that day in silence, her mind spinning. By evening, the hurt had hardened into resolve. They wanted her as the babysitter. They wanted to use her kindness as a leash. Then it was time to remind them she had teeth. That night, she called her best friend of 40 years, Loretta, a fiery woman with silver braids and a laugh that could shake walls. Low, Clarissa said, voice steady, I need your help. The plan formed quickly. On Wednesday, she began making phone calls, one to the caterer, another to the florist, another to the bakery. One by one, she cancelled the orders she had personally arranged and paid deposits for. She didn't flinch when penalties came. What was money compared to her self-respect? By Thursday, the house was quiet. The kitchen, once buzzing with plans, stood empty. Clarissa packed a small suitcase, tucked her coral dress, the one she wore when she wanted to feel powerful, into it, and zipped it closed with finality. On Friday morning, Loretta pulled up in her cherry red Buick, grinning ear to ear, ready to teach some folks a lesson. See, Clarissa straightened her back, her heart pounding not with fear but with exhilaration. Oh, I'm ready. She left a neatly folded letter on the dining table, addressed to Marcus. It was simple, direct, and mercilessly honest. Marcus, I cancelled the buffet. I won't be at the wedding. I will not spend your day running after children while you celebrate. I am your mother, not your nanny, not your staff. I wish you joy, but I will be gone until Sunday. With love, but with dignity. Mama C. As Loretta helped her carry the suitcase out, Clarissa looked one last time at the kitchen counter stacked with unused recipe cards. For years, she had poured her soul into feeding others, into proving her worth through service. Now, she was feeding herself, and when the Buick pulled out of the driveway, Clarissa felt lighter than she had in decades. She was done being used. She was ready to fight for her respect, even if it meant breaking her son's heart in the process. Charlotte Fitzgerald awoke the next morning with the kind of clarity that only comes after a night of betrayal. The conversation she had overheard still echoed in her mind, her son Marcus laughing, Tiffany's voice dripping with entitlement, and the dismissive certainty that she, at 72, would simply fall into place as their unpaid babysitter. She lay in bed longer than usual, the early sunlight creeping across the quilt she had sewn years ago. The house was quiet, but Charlotte's mind was anything but. For 72 years she had lived a life of service, first as a daughter, then as a wife, and finally as a mother. She had worked jobs no one thanked her for, cooked countless meals, babysat for neighbors, stayed late for church committees, and planned events that others enjoyed while she silently cleaned up the mess. But now she realized the line had been crossed. Her chest still burned from Tiffany's mocking words. She's 72, but she's spry. Let her handle them. That's what moms are for, right? The laughter that followed had felt like knives. Charlotte rose, tied her robe, and padded into the kitchen. She brewed her coffee extra strong. The steam fogged her glasses as she whispered into the empty room. Not this time. Canceling the buffet, her first act of defiance, came swift and deliberate. She dialed the catering service she had hired months ago, a local company that had worked weddings in the county for years. Hello, this is Charlotte Fitzgerald. Yes, I'm calling about the buffet order for the Fitzgerald wedding next Saturday. The woman on the other end smiled through her voice. Of course, Mrs. Fitzgerald, we've got you all set up. Cancel it, Charlotte interrupted. A stunned pause. I beg your pardon. Cancel every tray, every dish, every serving spoon. The order is off. Ma'am, are you sure? We've already, I'm sure, Charlotte said, her tone firm, almost shocking herself. And please, send written confirmation. Her hand trembled when she hung up, but her heart pounded with a newfound power. The florist next, she called the florist. Dozens of white lilies and roses had been ordered, centerpieces, bouquets, an archway for the altar. Cancel it all, Charlotte said, her voice steady. I won't be needing any of it. But Mrs. Fitzgerald, the florist pleaded, the order is already in progress, and your deposit, keep the deposit. Consider it payment for your trouble. Again, the click of the phone felt like a small thunderclap. Loretta's roll by mid-morning. Charlotte knew she couldn't walk this path alone. She needed an Ella, someone who had witnessed her years of quiet sacrifice, someone who would not lecture her for finally taking a stand. She called Loretta James, her closest friend since childhood. Loretta, 69, was outspoken, quick-witted, and fiercely loyal, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and command respect without trying. Loretta, it's Charlotte. Lord, what's happened now? Loretta asked immediately, hearing the unusual tension in Charlotte's voice. Charlotte told her everything: how Marcus and Tiffany had conspired to dump 15 children on her during the wedding, how they had laughed at her expense, how she had cancelled the buffet and flowers that very morning. Loretta whistled low. About time you woke up and smelled the foolishness. I'm not going to that wedding, Loretta. Not like they expect me to. What are you going to do? Charlotte hesitated, then said the words that had been forming in her heart since dawn. I'm going to take care of myself for once. I'm booking us into the spa resort down in Meadow. I'll be sipping champagne in a robe while they realize the hole they dug for themselves. A laugh burst from Loretta, deep and delighted. Now that's the Charlotte I've been waiting for. Baby, I'll pack my bag today. Let's watch that circus burn from a distance. The spa reservation. Charla had never been to a luxury spa. She had always told herself it was frivolous, something for younger women with disposable income. But now, with trembling fingers, she called the Meadowbrook Springs Resort. Yes, I'd like a weekend package. 2 guests, full treatment, if you please. The receptionist confirmed the booking, and Charlotte almost cried when she hung up. This wasn't just about massages and facials. It was about reclaiming her dignity. The quiet before the storm that afternoon, Marcus called. Charlotte stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. Finally, she swiped. Hey Mom. Marcus's voice was cheerful. Listen, Tiffany and I were talking, and we're so glad you'll be there Saturday. You know, handling the kids and all. We couldn't do this without you. Charlotte's lips tightened. She wanted to scream. You didn't even ask me. But she forced calm into her voice. She murmured vaguely. You're the best, Mom. We'll owe you big time. Oh, by the way, Tiffany's sister is bringing her twins, too. They're a handful, but you've got the magic touch. Charlotte gripped the phone so hard her knuckles whitened. Her silence stretched, and Marcus finally asked, Mom, you there? Yes, she said softly. I'm here. And then she hung up. Resolved that night, Charlotte packed, not for the wedding but for freedom. She laid her favorite dresses in the suitcase, folded her silk robe, and tucked away the novel she had been meaning to read for months. As she zipped the bag, she whispered to herself, They'll learn. They'll all learn. She did not cry. For the first time in years, Charlotte smiled as she drifted to sleep. The morning of the wedding dawned crisp and golden, sunlight spilling across Charlotte Fitzgerald's quiet neighborhood. Birds chirped as though the world had no idea that somewhere else, a storm was brewing in lace and champagne. Charlotte stood in her bedroom mirror, applying a soft shade of lipstick she hadn't worn in years. Her suitcase waited by the door, her best dress pressed and ready not for Marcus's wedding, but for her weekend of liberation. For a brief moment, she imagined the chaos already unfolding at the church. Tiffany shrieking about misplaced flowers, Marcus panicking over missing food, and children tumbling around with no one to corral them. The thought lifted her lips into a sly, private smile. Let them learn, she murmured. Loretta arrives at 9 sharp. A knock rattled her door. Loretta James stood outside, looking like rebellion wrapped in silk. At 69, she had a fuller figure, a head of silver curls, and a bold red dress that dared anyone to underestimate her. She carried 2 bags, one clearly packed with clothes, the other with snacks, ready to skip the circus. Loretta grinned. More than ready, Charlotte replied. As they loaded the car, Loretta leaned close. You think they've realized yet? Charlotte shook her head. Not a chance. Marcus thinks I'm ironing my church dress right now. They both laughed, the sound bubbling with mischief and long-suppressed joy. The drive to Meadowbrook Springs Resort took just under 2 hours. The highway wound through rolling hills and stretches of farmland, a serene contrast to the storm they had left behind. Charlotte felt the weight of 72 years lift from her shoulders with every passing mile. She rolled down the window, letting the autumn air whip through her hair. Loretta turned up the radio, an old soul track filling the car. Together, the women sang off-key, their laughter carrying louder than the music. For the first time in decades, Charlotte wasn't heading toward obligation. She was driving toward freedom. Arrival at the resort. Meadowbrook Springs Resort stood like a palace of indulgence, white columns rising against the backdrop of fiery autumn trees, fountains spilling into reflecting pools. The scent of lavender drifted from the gardens, and uniformed staff greeted them with smiles that spoke of pampered luxury. Charlotte's eyes widened. Oh, Loretta, it's beautiful, baby. This is exactly what you deserve, Loretta said, looping her arm through Charlotte's. At check-in, the receptionist handed them plush robes and keys to a suite with 2 queen beds and a balcony overlooking the gardens. Your massage appointments are at noon, followed by facials, the young woman explained. Dinner reservations are at 6 in the candlelit dining room. Charlotte nearly giggled. Candlelight. At 72, no one had offered her candlelight in years. The first sip of freedom by noon. Charlotte lay on a heated massage table, soft music filling the room. Skilled hands worked the knots from her shoulders. Tension built from decades of bending to everyone else's needs. As the therapist pressed away the stress, Charlotte thought of Marcus pacing the church hall, Tiffany snapping at volunteers, children shrieking without supervision. The image was so vivid she nearly laughed aloud. Afterward, she and Loretta reclined in the lounge, sipping champagne. The bubbles tickled Charlotte's nose, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to savor luxury without guilt. To us, Loretta toasted, raising her glass, and to them may their chaos be our entertainment. Charlotte clinked her glass with hers. To us. The calls begin. It started with one phone vibration, then another. By mid-afternoon, Charlotte's phone buzzed nonstop. Marcus, Loretta said, peeking at the screen. He's calling every 5 minutes. Charlotte set the phone face down. Let him stew. Messages stacked up. Mom, where are you? We can't find the buffet trays. Tiffany's furious. The flowers never showed up. Please tell me you're on your way with the kids. Charlotte didn't answer. She dipped her toes into the warm spa pool, leaning back against the edge, letting the jets pummel her calves. Lord, this is better than any revenge movie, Loretta cackled. Dinner at the resort that evening. Charlotte dressed in a flowing emerald gown that shimmered under the restaurant lights. Loretta wore bold gold earrings that caught every flicker of candlelight. The dining room glowed with warmth, tables draped in white linen, crystal glasses filled with fine wine, the air alive with soft piano music. Charlotte savored every bite of the 5-course meal, from the roasted duck to the decadent chocolates. Each taste reminded her she was no longer the overlooked, dutiful matriarch. She was a woman who deserved more. Halfway through dessert, her phone buzzed again. This time, Marcus's voice spilled out in a desperate voicemail. Mom, it's a disaster. Tiffany's crying. The kids are running wild. People are leaving early. Please, just come. I'll pay you $500. Just come. Charlotte sipped her wine. $500 for my dignity. Too cheap. The spa balcony later that night. Charlotte and Loretta sat on their balcony, the gardens glowing under moonlight. Fireflies danced above the fountains, and the air carried the scent of roses. Charlotte breathed deeply, the knot of hurt in her chest finally loosening. You ever think it'd come to this? Loretta asked. No, Charlotte admitted, but I'm glad it did, because now they'll finally see me for who I am, not just a free babysitter, not just the woman behind the buffet me. Loretta smiled. And it's about time. Charlotte gazed out into the night, her heart steady. Tomorrow, she knew, the full weight of her absence would crush the wedding, but tonight she was free. The Fitzgerald wedding was supposed to be the event of the year. Tiffany had spent months parading her plans across social media. Sparkling white roses, a gourmet buffet, 15 adorable flower children, and a glamorous reception that would have the town buzzing for weeks. But on the morning of the wedding, cracks began to spread like lightning across glass. The vanishing buffet. The first disaster struck when Tiffany marched into the reception hall at 10 a.m., her designer heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. She expected to see rows of silver trays steaming with delicacies. Instead, she found empty tables. Where are the caterers? Tiffany snapped at the event coordinator. They said the order was cancelled. The woman replied nervously, checking her clipboard. By Mrs. Fitzgerald herself. Tiffany froze, her painted lips parting. Charlotte, no, that's impossible. But confirmation emails told the truth. The buffet had been cancelled days ago. Tiffany's shriek rattled the stained glass windows. How could she do this to me, on my wedding day? Flowers, nowhere in sight. Moments later, another blow landed. The florist called to say the massive order of lilies and roses had been regretfully cancelled by Mrs. Fitzgerald. Tiffany's face blanched under her heavy makeup. She spun toward Marcus, who stood nervously adjusting his bow tie. Your mother, Tiffany hissed, has sabotaged us. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. Calm down, Tiff. Maybe it's a mistake. A mistake, she snapped. We don't have flowers, Marcus. We don't have food. And where is she? Where? Marcus pulled out his phone and dialed again. No answer. The children revolt. By noon, guests began arriving. Children in tow. One by one, families dropped off toddlers and grade schoolers at the church nursery, confidently saying, Charlotte's got them, right. Except Charlotte wasn't there. Within minutes, chaos erupted. Children screamed, toddlers escaped into the aisles, juice spilled across satin dresses. A little boy pulled at Tiffany's veil until it tore loose. Get them under control. Tiffany cried, but no one dared take responsibility. By the time the ceremony began, the sanctuary looked more like a daycare gone rogue. the bride's breakdown. As the organ played, Tiffany clutched her bouquet of limp grocery store carnations someone had scavenged at the last minute. She walked down the aisle with a forced smile, but her eyes darted wildly, searching the pews for Charlotte. Marcus whispered, "Just get through this, babe." But Tiffany was unraveling. The children screamed through the vows. One toddler threw his shoe at the pastor. Another crawled under Tiffany's gown, nearly tripping her. When the pastor said, "If anyone objects, speak now or forever hold your peace," a child shouted, "I gotta pee," and bolted down the aisle. The congregation laughed nervously. Tiffany did not. The reception disaster. If the ceremony was bad, the reception was catastrophic. Guests wandered into the hall expecting roasted meats and pasta stations. Instead, they found crackers, chips, and a sad assortment of grocery store sandwiches Marcus had grabbed in desperation. "This is it," one guest muttered. Tiffany's eyes burned with humiliation. "My wedding is ruined," she sobbed, mascara streaking her cheeks. Marcus tried to console her, but his own anger simmered. Why would Mom do this? She knew how important this day was. Across the hall, the children continued their revolt. Someone had opened a soda fountain, sticky liquid coating the floor. A boy vomited near the dance floor. Two little girls smeared frosting on the bride's gown. "Where is Charlotte?" Tiffany screamed, her voice breaking. Charlotte's silence. Meanwhile, at Meadowbrook Springs Resort, Charlotte and Loretta were enjoying pedicures. Charlotte's phone buzzed relentlessly on the table beside her, vibrating with each desperate message. "Mom, please, we need you. Everything is falling apart. The kids are out of control. Tiffany's losing it. Please, just come. I'll pay you $500. Just help us." Charlotte scrolled through, sipping her cucumber water. $500, she muttered. "They think my dignity comes that cheap." Loretta grinned. "Let 'em sweat." Public embarrassment. By the time the bride and groom attempted their first dance, half the guests had left. The DJ packed up early, complaining about spilled soda on his equipment. The cake smashed by children climbing onto the table sat in ruins. Tiffany's relatives whispered loudly about the fiasco. Someone even live-streamed the chaos. Clips quickly spreading online, the bride screaming, kids wrestling on the floor, Marcus arguing with the caterer over refunds. It was, by every definition, a social catastrophe. The breaking point. Back in the bridal suite, Tiffany collapsed on the couch, her gown stained and torn. "She did this to me on purpose," she cried. "Your mother hates me." Marcus paced the room, his jaw tight. He knew Tiffany was right. This wasn't coincidence. His mother had orchestrated this absence with precision. "I'll make her answer," Marcus muttered. "She owes us an explanation." Meanwhile, at the spot night, Charlotte sat in a hot tub under the stars, bubbles rising around her. Loretta raised her glass of champagne. To their meltdown, Loretta toasted. Charlotte chuckled softly, her eyes closing in peace. For the first time in years, she wasn't in the middle of a storm. She was finally watching from the outside. Calm and untouched. "They'll understand one day," Charlotte whispered. "Respect isn't free. You have to earn it." And as the Fitzgerald wedding crumbled into legend as the worst event in town's memory, Charlotte soaked in silence, already reclaiming her place not as a servant, but as a woman who had finally drawn her line. By dawn the morning after the wedding, the Fitzgerald household felt less like a newlywed home and more like a battlefield. Tiffany sat at the kitchen table in her ruined gown, mascara still staining her cheeks. Empty champagne bottles littered the counter, paper plates stacked high with uneaten sandwiches. The smell of spilled soda clung to the air like a stubborn ghost. Marcus shuffled in, his bow tie still hanging loose around his neck. His phone buzzed endlessly with messages, angry guests demanding refunds, relatives ridiculing the fiasco, and strangers tagging him in videos of their disaster now trending online. One clip had already hit 10,000 views. Tiffany screaming, "Where is Charlotte?" while a toddler smeared frosting across her veil. Marcus groaned, burying his head in his hands. "We're a joke, Tiff. A living, breathing joke." Tiffany's fury. Tiffany slammed her hands on the table. "This is your mother's fault. She sabotaged us. She canceled the buffet, the flowers. She didn't show up for the kids. She humiliated me." Marcus winced. I know, but no, but, Marcus, she planned this, and she's going to answer for it." Her voice shook with rage, but beneath the anger lay raw humiliation. Tiffany had built her entire identity around that wedding. She had promised her friends, her followers, her family, that it would be perfect. Instead, it was carnage broadcast for the world to see. "She hates me," Tiffany muttered, her voice breaking. "Your mother hates me. Marcus shook his head. She doesn't hate you, Tiff, but she's not happy with how we've treated her. Marcus's guilt. The words cut Marcus more than he expected. As he sat in the silence that followed, he replayed years of interactions with his mother, the dinners she hosted, the times she babysat without complaint, the countless favors she granted without ever asking for something in return. That had he really taken her for granted all this time? His chest tightened. He remembered her face the last time they spoke, quiet, almost resigned. She hadn't argued when he dumped responsibility on her. She hadn't even said no. She'd just hung up, and then, on the most important day of his life, she vanished. The phone call by afternoon, Marcus worked up the nerve to call again. His hands shook as he pressed the button. Ring, ring. Finally, Charlotte's voice answered, cool and steady. Hello, Marcus? Mom? Thank God. Where are you? What happened yesterday? The wedding. I know about the wedding, Charlotte said evenly. I heard it was memorable. Memorable. Marcus nearly shouted. It was a disaster. There was no food, no flowers. The kids were out of control. People left early. Mom, Tiffany's devastated. Charlotte's silence was heavy, deliberate. Then, she spoke. And you thought all of that would be my responsibility to fix, didn't you? Marcus faltered. Well, I've always picked up the pieces. Charlotte interrupted. I've always sacrificed my time, my money, my health for everyone else. But not this time. Her tone was so calm, it rattled him more than yelling ever could. The offer, Mom, Marcus pleaded. I'll pay you. I'll give you $500. Just help us fix this mess. Charlotte almost laughed. $500. You think my worth is measured in bills you can toss on the table. My dignity is not for sale, Marcus. He fell silent, shame rising in his chest. I love you, Charlotte continued, but love doesn't mean slavery. I will not be your babysitter, your caterer, your florist, or your scapegoat. Marcus swallowed hard. Then, what do you want from me? Charlotte's voice softened. Respect. That's all I've ever wanted. Tiffany's attempt that evening. Tiffany tried calling. At first, Charlotte ignored her, but when the calls came relentless, Charlotte finally answered. Mrs. Fitzgerald, Tiffany began, her tone sharp but trembling. I need to know, why did you do this to us? To me? Charlotte hesitated, then spoke carefully. Because you never asked. You assumed I would give up my entire day, my energy, my peace, to make your wedding perfect. You treated me like a convenience, Tiffany, not family. Tiffany's voice cracked. I didn't mean yes, you did, Charlotte interrupted softly, but maybe you didn't realize the cost. Now you do. For once, Tiffany had no comeback. She hung up, leaving Charlotte staring at the phone. Heart-pounding but steady. Peace at the spa back at Meadowbrook Springs. Charlotte let the tension slip away in the warm mineral pools. Loretta floated beside her, humming an old gospel tune. They're panicking without you, aren't they? Loretta asked, eyes twinkling. Yes, Charlotte admitted, but for the first time in my life, their panic isn't my problem. Loretta raised her glass of champagne. To freedom. Charlotte clinked her glass against hers. To freedom. And as the sun sank low over the resort gardens, Charlotte realized something profound. She had stepped out of the role they had written for her, and for the first time in 72 years, she was writing her own story. The spa smelled of lavender and eucalyptus, the kind of scents that made Charlotte feel weightless. She sat in a lounge chair by the window, robe tied loosely, her skin still warm from the sauna. For the first time in decades, her body felt free of burden. The phone, though, sat heavy in her lap, buzzing with notifications she hadn't yet opened. Loretta strolled over, holding 2 steaming cups of chamomile tea. Still blowing up? She asked, nodding at the phone. 17 new messages in the last hour, Charlotte sighed. Some from Marcus, some from Tiffany, even one from her father. Don't answer if you don't want to, Loretta said, handing her the tea. They put you in this mess. You owe them nothing. Charlotte nodded, but inside, her heart twisted. Marcus was still her son. The drive back in the city. Marcus gripped the steering wheel, driving on autopilot. His eyes were bloodshot. His suit from the wedding still crumpled in the back seat. Tiffany sat beside him, her face blotchy from crying. Marcus, don't go, she begged. She just humiliate us again. He shook his head. I need answers, Tiff. I need to look her in the eye and understand why she would do this. Why she would do this to me. It's not just you, Tiffany muttered. She did it to us, to me. Marcus tightened his jaw. Deep down, he wondered if this wasn't punishment he had earned. At the spa by early evening, The hum of a car engine echoed in the spa's quiet driveway. Loretta, glancing out the window, raised an eyebrow. Looks like trouble just arrived. Charlotte stood slowly, adjusting her robe. He actually came. Marcus's tall frame appeared through the glass doors. His shoulders slumped, his suit wrinkled. He spotted her instantly and froze. His face caught between relief and guilt. "Mom," he whispered. Charlotte folded her arms. "Marcus." The conversation begins. They sat across from each other in the spa's lounge. Loretta excused herself, though not far. She lingered close, pretending to read a magazine. Marcus rubbed his temples. "Why, Mom? Why didn't you come to the wedding? Why cancel everything? Do you have any idea what you did to us?" Charlotte met his eyes calmly. "I know exactly what I did. I stopped letting myself be used." Marcus's voice cracked. "It wasn't like that." Charlotte leaned forward. "Wasn't it? I heard you, Marcus. I heard Tiffany. I heard how convenient it would be to have me chasing children all night. How I wouldn't interrupt your adult conversations. Do you think I didn't notice the way she spoke about me? As if I were staff and not family." Marcus flushed, shame flickering across his face. "She didn't mean it." "She did," Charlotte interrupted firmly. "And you let her." The sons break down for a long moment. Marcus said nothing. His jaw clenched, his hands trembled. Finally, he blurted out, "I didn't know what else to do." His voice echoed in the serene lounge, startling even himself. "I wanted everything perfect. Mom, I thought if you helped, it would be easier. You've always fixed everything. You've always been the one holding it all together. I didn't stop to think about what it cost you." Charlotte's eyes softened. "And it cost me a lot, Marcus. Years of putting myself last. Years of trying to earn respect that should have been freely given." Tears slipped down his cheeks. At 45, Marcus suddenly looked like a little boy again. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered. "I should have asked. I should have respected you enough to ask." Tiffany appears. The glass doors opened again, and Tiffany stormed in. She had traded her ruined gown for jeans and a blouse, but her eyes still burned with resentment. "So this is where you've been hiding," she snapped. "At a spa, while we dealt with the disaster you created." Charlotte stayed seated, serene. "I didn't create it, Tiffany. Your entitlement did." Tiffany scoffed. "Entitlement? You're his mother. Family helps family. Family asks family," Charlotte corrected. "Family doesn't assign duties like I'm an employee. You wanted a free nanny, a free caterer, a free florist. That's not family, that's exploitation." Marcus raised a hand. "Tiff, stop." But Tiffany wasn't finished. "She embarrassed us in front of everyone. Marcus, people were laughing. My friends, my family, everyone saw us fail because of her." Charlotte's gaze was steady. "No, Tiffany, they saw you fail because you thought respect was optional." The turning point. Marcus stood, voice trembling but firm. "Tiffany, enough. Mom's right." Tiffany whipped around, stunned. "What did you just say?" "I said, she's right. We treated her like help. I let it happen, and it nearly destroyed our wedding. That's on us, not her." Tiffany's face went pale. She looked at Marcus, then at Charlotte, then back again. Her lips trembled, but no words came. For the first time, she seemed cornered by her own behavior. Charlotte exhaled slowly. The moment she'd waited for had finally arrived, not to win, not to gloat, but to be heard. Charlotte's conditions. "I'm not asking for apologies you don't mean," Charlotte said gently. "What I want is respect. From now on, if you need me, you ask me, and you accept my answer, yes or no. You treat me as a guest at family events, not as staff. And Tiffany," she turned her gaze on her daughter, "you need to decide if you want a relationship with me, or just a convenient arrangement, because I won't tolerate disrespect again." Silence, heavy, long, but not hostile, just waited with the truth. Marcus nodded. "That's fair, Mom. More than fair." Tiffany's eyes glistened, though whether from shame or fury, Charlotte couldn't tell. The end of the day, as Marcus drove Tiffany home, Charlotte returned to her spa suite. Loretta peeked in with a smirk. "Well," Charlotte smiled faintly, "for the first time in years, I think you heard me." She slipped into bed, the lavender-scented sheets wrapping her in peace. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, but tonight, Charlotte allowed herself the luxury of rest. For the first time, she felt not just like Marcus's mother but like Charlotte Fitzgerald, a woman who had finally claimed her dignity. The Fitzgerald house was quiet, but it was the kind of silence that hummed with tension. Tiffany sat alone at the dining table, her half-finished glass of red wine untouched. She stared at her reflection in the polished wood, eyes ringed with exhaustion. The past week had been a blur. The ruined wedding reception, Marcus siding with Charlotte at the spa, her own friends whispering behind her back. Tiffany had never felt so exposed, so judged. She lifted the glass to her lips, but set it down again, her throat too tight to swallow. Marcus's gentle push. Marcus entered the room, sleeves rolled up, tie discarded. He looked weary, but calmer than he had in days. He paused when he saw Tiffany, then took the seat opposite her. Long day? He asked carefully. She gave a sharp laugh. That's one way to put it. Everyone's still talking about the wedding that imploded. My mother hasn't stopped calling. Marcus rubbed his forehead. Tiff, we can't change what happened, but we can fix what comes next. Her eyes narrowed. You mean with your mother? Yes, he said simply. With Mom. The mirror shifts. Tiffany stood abruptly, pacing the room. I don't know if I can do that, Marcus. Do you realize how humiliating it was? She made me look like a fool. Marcus's tone softened. No, Tiffany, you made yourself look like a fool. Mom didn't lie. She didn't attack. She just refused to be treated like staff. Everyone saw that. The words stung, but deep down, Tiffany knew they were true. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes earnest. You don't have to like her, but you have to respect her, because she's part of this family. And if we ever want peace in this house, you and Mom need to talk woman to woman. The invitation for 2 days. Tiffany wrestled with the idea. Pride screamed at her to stay silent, to let Charlotte come crawling back, but something Marcus said lingered. Everyone saw it. Her reputation wasn't ruined because Charlotte had refused. It was ruined because Tiffany had been exposed as selfish. So, on the third morning, Tiffany stood at the kitchen counter with her phone in hand, staring at Charlotte's contact information. Her thumb hovered, then finally pressed call. The line rang once, twice. Hello. Charlotte's voice was warm, steady. Tiffany swallowed hard. Charlotte, it's me, Tiffany. A pause, then, gently, yes, Tiffany. What can I do for you? Tiffany's throat tightened. She wanted to lash out, to defend herself, but the words came out quieter than she expected. I think we need to talk, just us. No, Marcus. Charlotte didn't hesitate. I agree. When the meeting, they chose a neutral space, a quiet cafe near the river. Tiffany arrived first, dressed impeccably as always. Pearl earrings, tailored blazer, lipstick carefully applied, but beneath the polished surface, her nerves frayed. Charlotte arrived moments later, dressed more casually, flowing blouse, comfortable flats. Her presence radiated calm, but her eyes stayed sharp. They sat, ordered coffee. Silence stretched, broken only by the hum of distant conversation. Finally, Tiffany spoke. I suppose I owe you an apology. Charlotte tilted her head. Suppose? Tiffany bristled. I mean, I do. I'm sorry. For the things I said, for the way I treated you. It wasn't right. Charlotte didn't rush to respond. She let the words settle, then nodded slowly. Thank you. That's not easy to say, the unraveling, but Tiffany wasn't finished. Her composure cracked as she leaned forward, voice trembling. You don't understand, Charlotte. Everyone looks at me like I'm this perfect bride, this flawless wife. But do you know how hard it is to compete with a woman like you? Marcus worships you. He compares everything I do to you. Even if he doesn't say it out loud. I felt like the only way to prove myself was to run the show, to be in control. Her eyes glistened. And then you refused. And I felt powerless. Charlotte softened, surprised by the confession. Tiffany, I never wanted to compete with you. You're his wife. That's your role, not mine. But I also won't shrink to make you feel taller. You have to find your worth without taking mine away. Tiffany blinked, the words hitting deeper than she expected. A fragile understanding for the first time. The wall between them cracked. Tiffany realized Charlotte wasn't her rival. She was a woman who had fought her own battles, who had earned her strength the hard way. I don't know if I can do this perfectly, Tiffany admitted, her voice breaking. But I want to try. For Marcus, for us. Charlotte reached across the table, placing a hand over Tiffany's. That's all I ask. Respect, effort, honesty. For a moment, Tiffany allowed the touch, and in that moment, she glimpsed the possibility of peace. The return home. When Tiffany returned home that evening, Marcus was waiting. His eyes searched her face. How did it go? Tiffany set down her bag, exhaling slowly. It went better than I thought. She listened. I listened. We're not best friends, Marcus. But maybe we don't have to be. Maybe we just have to be family. Marcus's eyes shone with relief. He pulled her into his arms. For the first time since the wedding, Tiffany let herself breathe. Charlotte's reflection back in her own apartment. Charlotte sipped tea by the window. She thought of Tiffany's confession, of the fear beneath the arrogance. She realized something important. Tiffany wasn't just a spoiled woman. She was insecure, desperate for approval, fighting shadows Charlotte hadn't even known existed. Charlotte didn't excuse her behavior, but she finally understood it. An understanding, she knew, was the first step toward change. She closed her eyes, whispering softly to herself, "This family may still have a chance." The Fitzgerald dining room had seen its share of arguments, silent glares across the table, biting remarks dropped like daggers, and the heavy clatter of forks when tension grew too thick to swallow. Tonight, however, the air felt different, tentative, fragile, like a glass sculpture balanced on a wire. The long oak table gleamed under the chandelier. Crystal glasses stood ready. The smell of roast chicken, garlic bread, and buttered corn filled the space. But unlike every other family gathering in the past, Charlotte had cooked none of it. Marcus had hired a caterer. He insisted on it. The gathering Charlotte arrived a little after 6, wearing a navy dress with pearl earrings. She looked regal but comfortable, her hair swept back, her steps steady. Tiffany greeted her at the door. Her smile was careful, but real. "Charlotte, I'm glad you came." Charlotte studied her for a moment, then returned the smile. "Thank you for inviting me." Marcus, standing behind Tiffany, looked relieved, as if the entire evening depended on this single exchange. "The dinner begins." They sat down together, Marcus at the head, Tiffany on his right, Charlotte on his left. The caterer served the food, the clink of silverware filling the silence until Marcus finally cleared his throat. "So," he began, "I thought it would be nice if we could all start fresh. A new chapter." Charlotte raised an eyebrow. "A new chapter requires honesty about the last one." Tiffany stiffened, then slowly set down her fork. "She's right." The apology in full, everyone froze. Tiffany inhaled deeply, her voice trembling but steadying as she went on. "Charlotte, I owe you more than just an apology for the wedding. I owe you one for the way I've treated you since I met you. I saw you as competition, not family, and I thought the only way to prove my place here was to control everything, even you." Her eyes shone as she glanced at Marcus, then back at Charlotte. "It was wrong, and it was cruel. I'm sorry." The words hung in the air. Charlotte studied Tiffany carefully, searching her face for cracks of insincerity, but what she saw instead was raw vulnerability. "I accept your apology," Charlotte said softly, "but what matters is not what you say tonight, it's what you do tomorrow." A test of change. Dinner went on more smoothly after that. They talked about Marcus's work, about Tiffany's plans for a design studio, about Charlotte's book club. It was normal, almost pleasant. Halfway through dessert, Tiffany surprised them both. "Charlotte," she said, "there's a charity gala next month. I'd like you to come, as a guest, not to help, just to be there." Charlotte blinked, startled. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was real. An invitation of respect. "I'd like that," Charlotte replied with a small smile. The family portrait later that evening. After the caterer cleared the dishes, Marcus pulled out an old photo album. Inside were pictures of him as a boy, birthday parties, school plays, Christmas mornings. In every photo, Charlotte was there in the background, baking, decorating, clapping, holding, always present, always giving. He looked at her with misty eyes. "I never realized until now how much of my life you carried on your shoulders. I don't want to take that for granted anymore." Charlotte's chest tightened. For years, she had longed to hear those words. "You don't owe me perfection, Marcus," she whispered. "Just gratitude, just respect." The turning point. As the night wound down, Tiffany disappeared briefly, then returned with something unexpected. A framed photo from the wedding day. Not of her and Marcus, but of Charlotte sitting alone in the spa robe. A candid shot someone had taken without her noticing. She looked peaceful, glowing, strong. "I had this printed," Tiffany said softly, "because it reminded me of who you are. Not just Marcus's mother, not just my mother, but Charlotte, a woman who deserves to be seen." Charlotte's eyes brimmed with tears. For the first time, she felt not like a tool, not like an accessory, but like herself. The final word. As Charlotte prepared to leave, Marcus walked her to the door. "Thank you for giving us another chance," he murmured. Charlotte touched his cheek, her eyes steady. "Family isn't about using each other, Marcus, it's about lifting each other. Don't forget that." He nodded, holding her hand tightly before letting go. Charlotte stepped into the cool night air, her heart lighter than it had been in years. The stars above seemed brighter, the world wider. For the first time, Charlotte Fitzgerald knew she wasn't just surviving her family, she was shaping it. And finally, she had a seat at the table.